I moved here in 1973. I was 26 years old, and then other young people began to move here. They were all close to my age or younger. We were all in our 20s at that time. We discovered that there were some Quonset huts for sale in Barstow, California, at a military barracks there. And so we bought them for $500 each. Each Quonset hut. The catch was we had to disassemble them ourselves and haul them out here. Well, Barstow is in the desert, and this was in the summer, and it was blistering hot. So it wasn't easy, but we disassembled them, and then we hauled them out, and then the work proceeded in the construction. It was at that point that we discovered how hard the ground is here, and it's solid clay. And we were digging the foundation, and we had a tractor, and we had the implement for it, but it kept breaking. And we just, every time we get a new implement, and it would break on the foundation. So finally, us young men, we just got picks and shovels, and we dug it out. And it was a lot of hard work. We had an old potbelly stove to warm it, because some mornings it was cold. The floors were dirt at first. As a result, when you kneel down to pray, you were kneeling in the dirt. So you didn't come in a fancy suit to church. We adapted to the needs. And another challenge was in planting the garden, we didn't have an irrigation system. There was 2 irrigation channels, and water went through them. But the ground that they gave us was uphill. And without a pump, all we could do was take 2 5-gallon buckets, go over to the ditch, pick up the water, and walk to the plants and water them individually. And it took a whole slew of young people. One good thing is, by the end of that summer, I was in the best condition of my life.
Our pulpit in the Quonset hut faced away from the door, so your back was to the door. And there's no air conditioning, so as it got warm, we had to leave the door open. So Uncle Larry's preaching one day, and a ram, a big ugly ram with big ugly horns, appears right behind him in the door. And he's looking in. And all of a sudden, Uncle Larry loses the attention of everybody in the audience. None of us, by the way, are saying, "Hey, Larry, ram." None of us are saying that. We're all just sitting there saying, I wonder what's going to happen next.
People were laughing, and I didn't know what they were laughing at.
It was the craziest thing. I was like, I think that ram's going to charge him. You think I'd help? You'd be wrong. I'm not helping. I'm going to sit here paralyzed by fear.
I recall that we got this idea because we were doing research, on farming. So we got this idea that one of the greatest things for plants was manure tea. Now, I had never heard of manure tea before. I didn't even know what it was. But you get a big 50-gallon drum, and then you'd fill it part way with manure and the rest of the way with water. And you'd let it steep for a while. and then you'd, siphon it out and have it begin to fertilize the ground. And the problem was we had to decide who was going to siphon that to get it started.
So to be clear, you had to siphon with your mouth. Okay, so you had to suck with your mouth
It was,
into the tube until the flow got going.
and so Dennis and I were out there, Dennis Calabrese, and we drew straws as to who was going to siphon, and he lost. It's a true story. So I'll never forget him siphoning it, and he waited a little too long. So then it was spitting, gagging, So we had some fun times as well as some challenging
that was
times.
not one of them.
Larry and the gang, they were brave. They said they're going to build a farm here. Said, go for it. But it's really clay and it's real bad, and you can hardly, over in this field, they had a field all the way across and all that. And I said, man, it'd be hard to grow crops on that clay land.
This land that had been leased to us, it wasn't the best land for growing crops. In fact, when we did soil tests, the report that we got back was that it was not suitable to growing crops. In fact, it was more suitable to making bricks. And so they recommended against even, using it for a farm, and people didn't expect much. But by golly, by the grace of God, and through a lot of fasting, prayer, and hard work, by the end of that summer, we had an abundance of crops. And we harvested it. We went to a chapter meeting. There's a lot of people there at the meeting. And we brought all of our crops, our harvest there. And we laid it out on the table. And we invited people to come and share in the produce. And in those days, we decided that we would have a Thanksgiving feast, kind of hearkening back to the days when the Pilgrims came to America and they had that harvest feast. And we invited the Navajos from that community to join us for a dinner, for a banquet. And many of them came, and it was one of the most wonderful times. And that became a tradition for us, and they would have a Christmas banquet, and then they would invite us to their Christmas banquet. One of the things that many people didn't realize in those days is that we were given permission to farm there, but because they already had a lot of churches, we were actually told not to proselytize the community. And we honored that request, and we felt that we would just show love, because we could always do that. We would attend their weddings and funerals and different family events. One of the families invited us to a picnic on their land. That was one of the most wonderful times we ever had. And we all gathered together, our people and their people on their land. And they took us to a cave there that the people, their forefathers, had used to hide from Kit Carson when they came through here to round up the people to take them on the long walk to Fort Sumner. We went for a hike, through their land. We were allowed to have church there, but we couldn't invite them to church. They could come, and some of them did come, and they asked us if they could come. So we did what we could in those days, but we had to prove ourselves, and so that's what we did.
I don't think it was by any genius on our part. I really believe it was the direction of the Lord. But our work here started working the land. That had an enormous value to the people here, because there's a strong connection to land that non-Navajos don't understand in the same way. The Navajo word for land is shikea, and ke is the word for feet, and there's a holiness to it because they view the earth as your mother and the land as the connection to your feet. It's where you connect to your mother, okay? And so when they saw us come here for the first time, it wasn't to teach them about hell and to kind of threaten them that if they didn't accept Jesus, that was their fate. It was to see them take care of their mother, to watch them take care of the land, and to treat it as special. Even though, as Uncle Larry said, It was difficult. It wasn't easy at all. But to treat it as special and to treat it with love. And we've had people tell us that made us different, that they saw us in a different light. Because here are these white people that are coming from other places, and they're taking care of our mother and showing their love. The song we sang as kind of a theme song in the early days of our mission was "They'll know we're God's children by our love," and that was the first way we showed love was to take care of the land. I'm the only one, at least that's here, that moved here involuntarily. I was 7. I had just finished second grade in Los Angeles. We had a very nice home. My father had a good job. And to be frank, I was enjoying the life of a privileged young man in Los Angeles. When we got here, I remember my first impressions were, did I have to live like this? I remember traveling with my father, Dwayne Jordan, and my uncle, Dennis Calabrese, and Dennis saying to me, well, we're having a hard time finding this road because there's no street signs here. And I thought, well, why? do they know that street signs exist? I mean, it made no sense to me that they wouldn't have street signs. And it's now 50 years later and they still don't. But I mean, those were the images I had. I remember, where are the buildings? I mean, I left Los Angeles and everywhere you go, there's buildings. Here there was scrub brush and trees. I mean, there were no buildings. And I really couldn't fathom why we were doing it. We had to use an outhouse as a restroom for a long time. We had a dirt floor that we worshiped on for a while. It was cold in the winter. It was hot in the summer. It was not easy to get basic needs, and it felt like a struggle all the time. And I remember as a young man, my parents, talking with my parents and asking them when we were going to return to Los Angeles, and my father saying, never. And I just remember thinking, why? I mean, it was hard. It was hard as a child because it was hard to appreciate the greater purpose that the adults understood as a 7-year-old. I just knew that I had a very comfortable life that had come to an end and that I was probably never going to get back.
So one Sunday morning, one of the young brothers in our congregation, he got up in the testimony service and he said, I hate to put a damper on things, but I believe we're just wasting our time. Now look, we're all the Navajos. They're not here and they're not coming. I've just had it with all the hard work, and so he was expressing a great amount of distress, and it just shocked us to hear this. Well, there was a Navajo in the congregation, and she had never said anything in our service before. She'd never gotten up and testified, nothing. She was not a member. And after he sat down, she got up and she was crying, and she called him by name and she said, "You're wrong. They do see what you're doing. And they know they know that you've come here to help us. And she said, don't give up. Don't give up. Because they'll come. Just be patient. You'll see. They'll come. And at that point, we called the brother up front to pray for him. So we prayed for him and could see that he was still troubled. And so at that point, we said, well, why don't you pray now? So he got on his knees, and as well as the rest of us, everybody got on their knees. And he prayed. And in his prayer, he said, Lord, give us a sign. Give us a sign right now.
So to give you perspective as a child, this person we're talking about, he was in a very negative spirit. It was almost scary. I mean, it was just, when he said, they will not come, I mean, it was very firm. It was not like, I hope they'll come, but maybe he said, what are we doing? What are we doing? They will not come. And everybody became very emotional because we were working so hard. And then it was like Elijah with the prophets of Baal. It was like he called on God. And not in a good spirit either. It was like he was challenging God. And he said, if I'm wrong, then let them come now.
We all got up, turned around, and the door opens. And when the door opened, there was all this light that came in to the building. And through that light came 6 people, all Navajos. And they came in and they took their seats, and some people gasped, others were crying, and we welcomed them to the Church of Jesus Christ.
And as Uncle Larry said earlier, we weren't even allowed to invite them. So these were not people we'd said, hey, come to church, please. Okay? We weren't allowed to invite them. So the door opens, and to describe the light that came, and Uncle Larry's right, it wasn't a vision, because we all saw the light. This is not one person's subjective vision. Everybody who describes it, and if you ask anybody else who was there, saw the light. A beam of light came in like the sun was shining through the door. Okay? It wasn't like it was a dark room and you open up a door in the middle of the day and it kind of lightens up the room. It wasn't that. It was a beam of light that came in. For me, this was a cornerstone moment in my life. I was probably about 9, and I'd already talked about how difficult things had been. And it would be later before I would understand that this kind of thing doesn't happen all the time. Because at 9 years old, you don't know. You're kind of trying to figure things out. But now as an adult, I'm 56 now, I look back and I realize that was the moment where never again I would be able to deny the reality of God. And not just the reality of God, but the reality of God in this work. I mean, this determined my life path, because I could never deny that God was at work, that he involved himself in people's affairs, that he was not some distant God who didn't care, that he cared, because he answered at that moment. And he answered in a way to say, I am in this work. I am here.
And then we asked them to if they could tell us why they came at that moment, to give their testimony. And one of the women, she said that they had already been to church. And they were on their way back from church, going home. And one of the men in the car, he said, stop in that parking lot. We're going into that building right now. And that's what they did. And so we never forgot that. I've never forgotten what happened that day, because it was a living testimony that God was pleased with what we were doing.